Hey, so in this video we'll be doing the Easter eggs and predictions for Season 1, Episode 2 of Marvel's The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So beware spoiler, not caught up. So the episode's title was called The Star-Spangled Man, which is referring to the aftermath of the big reveal that there's a new Captain America with John Walker, and it's we're seeing how Sam and Bucky are dealing with it, and they actually do come into contact with John Walker a couple of times throughout the episodes. So yeah, it's mainly about him, and we actually do start off with with John Walker, and he's kind of nervous to go and talk to have an interview or whatever, and his friend, don't know what his friend's name is, real name is called, but I will talk about him later on in the video. But he says the man with the plan or something like that, and that's actually a line from the Star Spangled Man from the Captain America the First Avenger, and they actually do play that song through the opening of the title sequence and throughout just before John Walker starts to have the interview with during on Good Morning America, which is actually a new actual uh, news news thing on ABC Studios, which we see how since ABC is owned by Disney. Disney is allowed to use them in their TV shows and movies and stuff like that, and especially in Agents of Shield, where they popped up a couple of times, I believe. I know at least once they did, but yeah, it's nice synergy, I guess, behind the scenes, because you own them, you can use them, I guess. So yeah, John Walker was been asked a bunch of questions and whatnot, and he says he's not Tony Stark, he's not Dr. Banner, talking about saying he doesn't have any gadgets or any super strength or stuff like that, but he is the heart, I guess. Uh, so yeah, nothing really to do there, just giving you information about what kind of person this guy is and how he became this new Captain America and why, how fit he fit he is, basically. And how heroic he actually is. But we jump forward to jump to uh, Sam, and we see Bucky watching the news, the interview. He's not really happy with it. Then we jump to Sam. He's not happy either with the fact that that John Walker got the shield and whatnot. And they start to clash. They actually end up clashing at one another for the first time in the series. And Sam actually mentions that they're tracking down the flag smashers, and we actually did see it in a trailer and a sneak peek. And the scene is where he starts to talk about the big three, which is aliens, androids, and wizards. Which aliens, obviously referring to like Jatari, Thanos, Loki, Thor, stuff like Asgardians and stuff like that. But also probably wizards as well, uh, because Loki is a magical person, so he has magical powers, so he would be classified as a wizard. But also Ebony Thawne, I think, or something. One of the Black Order aliens who had magic in Infinity War, so he would be classed as a wizard as well. But then he also mentions androids, which is obviously referring to Ultron. So it's the big three: uh, aliens, androids, and wizards. So yeah, but they have a little bit of debate whether or not wizards are actually real. Sam says that wizards are just uh, wizards are just uh, or sorcerers are just wizards without a hat, something like that. But then they talk about the book or the Hobbit, and Sam is surprised that he knows about the Hobbit, but he forgot that the Hobbit was a book back in 1937 1937, uh, when Bucky was actually around and he actually had read it. And the reason Sam was surprised was because he knew about Gandalf. So yeah. Uh, then Bucky goes along with Sam to go find the Flag Smashers, which I'm surprised he's even allowed to, because Sam's working with the military and Bucky's not, as far as I know. So it was kind of weird to me there why he was allowed to go along with this plan. But they end up going flying to wherever they're going, and Bucky's asking what's the plan, and he assumes that Sam has no plan, and then he just jumps out the plane without telling Bucky what is the plan, and it's very similar to the actual first Avengers movie with Captain America and Iron Man, where Captain America wanted a plan, so that would be uh, Bucky in this situation, whereas Sam is the one that's not telling the plan and is just jumping out of the plane, which Iron Man did that same thing where he says his plane is basically attack, so that's basically what it looked like Sam was doing here. So that's this little parallel there, and they joked about Bucky's time in Wakanda, saying that he's the black. Sam is saying that he's the White Panther, but instead he actually mentions that he's the White Wolf, which I never actually got around to talking about it because I don't think I ever even reviewed it or talked about any of the movies for the longest time on this channel. But the White Wolf is actually a character in the comics. It's not Bucky, but it is a character from Wakanda who is, I think, like a security guard person, I think, something like that. He's protects Wakanda, I think, as far as I know. So yeah. And I know this doesn't happen until later on, or actually something else doesn't happen later on, but they have this fight with the Flag Smashers, and John Walker and his friend come and help rescue, help out. And for a second, I still kind of do believe that it does feel like kind of a setup, even though we did see them fighting the Flag Smashers after the fact. That what's called Sam and Bucky were not there anymore, so they should not be playing around or pretending that they're fighting one another just for the audience. It would just kind of be weird if that's the case. It just felt, when they first arrived, it felt kind of weird that they just got there randomly. It did feel like it was a setup on their part to make it look like he's an actual hero when he's actually not. So yeah, but we meet his friend, or what's called John Walker's friend, and he goes by the name Battlestar, which is a character from the comics, and he was introduced in Captain America number 323, which came out in November of 1986, and he actually used to go by an alias and by the name Bucky, which since Captain America's had the what's called since Captain America had the sidekick of Bucky back in the day, they wanted, I guess, they used that name for the John Walker's sidekick, but they realized later on that I'm not 100% sure exactly, but it was a racist undertone, so they changed it to Battlestar, and that's why he goes by Battlestar now. He goes by Battlestar in the show, and it's kind of interesting how they used that frame of like framing in this scene where John Walker's sitting in front of in front of Sam, which is the rightful owner of the shield to become Captain America, because Steve became handed the shield over to Sam, and whereas Battlestar is sitting in front of Bucky, which Bucky is was the name that the Battlestar in the comics went by at one point. It's kind of interesting that they used, and he's the sidekick of this Captain America. It's kind of interesting in that scenario. So yeah, and Bucky actually asks, "Have you ever jumped on a grenade?" Referring to the fact that even before Steve became Captain America, he was willing to sacrifice himself to protect people because he had a good heart. So that you see that, and apparently he did at one point. So yeah, and I know this happens a bit later on in the episode. I just was writing it down because I was just remembering exactly what was happening, because I was doing it during writing this stuff during a rewatch. So we actually meet two other characters besides Battlestar in this episode, and one of them is Elijah Bradley, which in the comics it's basically the same story that he basically tells to Bucky and Sam, is very similar to what happens in the comics. He was a test subject after Captain America disappeared. I don't know exactly what the time frame was in the comics, but here they say he was been tested on in the 50s, I believe, and then he was imprisoned for 50 years, I think, and I believe it was only 13 years in the comics. So there's a bit of difference there, but he was actually the only test subject that actually survived in the comics, and he became the Captain America for a bit before he was imprisoned for stealing the Captain America costume, as far as I understand, or like what the government was looking like, thinking that was happening or something like that. So yeah, but basically the same thing happened after being imprisoned. Everyone forgot about him. And he just became no one really knew him, other than in the comics it was the black community, whereas as far as we know in the MCU, only the one that knows about him is Bucky. So yeah, we might dig deeper into his backstory, and maybe more people do know who he actually was, but as of right now only Bucky does know. So yeah, and we also meet Elijah's grandson, Eli Bradley, who goes by the name the Patriot in the comics, and he was introduced. Elijah Bradley was introduced in Red, White, and Black #1 in January 2003. So he's a pretty new addition, same as his grandson or whatever, Eli Bradley, who goes by the name the Patriot in the comics, and he was introduced in Young Avengers #1 in April of 2005. So they're both new additions, I guess, to the comics, kind of 15 years or so. So yeah, and as you just heard, that Elijah Bradley goes by the name Patriot, who was introduced in the Young Avengers, which obviously, if you were watching my WandaVision, WandaVision videos, I did mention the Young Avengers a couple times, I believe, because there were two characters that are from that team that were introduced in that show. So they're obviously introducing a lot more Young Avengers in the series to spin off to a series later on in the show, or later on in the MCU. So yeah, but we find out that apparently people in this world, after the blimp, are considering the Flag Smashers as Robin Hoods. I guess they're stealing from people to give back to the poor, because apparently, uh, after the blimp, no one, the government is more or more focused on the people that coming from back from the blimp instead of the people that were here before the blimp happened in between the 5 years, so that who never left. So they're trying to give back to the people that the government is not focusing on. So yeah, but I don't know if I mentioned it in the last episode. I did talk about who the Flag Smasher was in the comics. That he was a one person, like one person, not a group. But we do find out that the leader of this group was Carly Morgenthau, I think her name is pronounced. But in the comics, it was actually a guy called Carl Morgenthau, and he was actually introduced in Captain America number 312 that came out on December of 1985. So yeah, but you see, I guess it's just a gender swap. But you see that she's actually the leader, kind of like how Carl in the comics is the leader of the the Ultimatums group instead of the Flag Smasher group. So yeah, uh, and we get a little callback to Civil War because it leads up to what's gonna happen in the next episode where uh, was called Sam reminds Bucky exactly what happened. Uh, During that time, after that time, where after they stole the shield from the government, Sharon became the enemy of the state. So she's on the run, and we know she's coming back later on in this series. I don't know exactly when or how she's going to come about, but and then Sam and Steve were on the run for 2 years. That until the Infinity War happened. So yeah. Uh, and then we have a scene in therapy, which people are assuming we're gonna have this. This is probably gonna be the last therapy session for the series. I'm assuming it's not gonna be the last therapy session because there's a lot more to dig deep in Bucky's mind or whatever, and I'm assuming we might actually see him later on, like at the end of the series, like the last episode, in therapy again, talking to her. But we actually have a little bit of uh, a breakthrough of why Bucky is so pissed off at Sam. It's because Bucky feels that Sam is betraying Steve's legacy because he gave over the shield because Steve trusted him, and he says that if he was wrong about you, he was wrong about me because his own ever since he became the Winter Soldier, Steve has been the one trying to bring him back in and be because he knew he was a good guy. Was like just trying to prove Steve was trying to prove to the world that he was actually a good person and he could be a better person and not be the Winter Soldier that he was. So if if Steve was wrong about Sam being the rightful owner of being the next Captain America, Bucky feels that he could be Sam or Steve was wrong about him. So yeah, but we have a mention of the Power Broker because the Flag Smashers were trying to escape through on a plane, and someone gets a text or something and saying that the Power Broker's men are coming, and I talked about them in the last episode, and I talked about how it's all connected to the Flag Smashers of becoming super soldiers, and how it can connect to Joaquin Torres become the next Falcon and stuff like that. And apparently in the comics as well, Power Broker has ties to John Walker, and he actually does get super strength at some point in the comics. So he could probably be tied as well to him. So I don't know exactly where they're gonna go with power John Walker storyline, but he does not seem like he's going to be a friendly person. After the last conversation Bucky and Sam had with him. So yeah, but this leads into the next episode where uh, they're trying to figure out exactly how uh, there's 8 new super soldiers in this world after the 50 years, I believe, or something like that. They said 50. I don't know how many years they said, but Bucky said so many years later, or Sam or Bucky said years later. How is there so 8 more super soldiers out there, and they plan on going to see the only person they know that would have information about this or might have information, and that is Zemo, because he was so obsessed with Hydra and trying to figure out how to uh, control Bucky's brainwashing and all that kind of stuff. So that he dug into Hydra and all that kind of stuff. So he could probably know exactly how this is, how there's more super soldiers out there. So they're ending up to go. They end up going to see Zemo to talk about Hydra in the next episode, and this leads to the only theory I have. I don't know if I can't think of any other reason why he's more important in later on in this series, but I'm assuming he's gonna break out. I'm not. I'm saying he's gonna break out. I'm not sure. I can't see Bucky or Sam breaking him out, because that would just be really weird. If he's the one that if they're the ones that actually break him out. So I'm assuming he's gonna break out and they're gonna clash but have to team up later on in the series. So yeah, and this is just a weird thing that I saw in this episode. I was under the impression that when we last saw him, last saw Zemo in Civil War, he was in the cell, that was movable. So I wonder if they're gonna explain why they moved him from that cell to an actual cell room that he had in this episode. I wonder if he had blimped out, and once he reappeared 5 years later, that cell that he was contained in wasn't there anymore, so he was basically free, and maybe someone someone had to track him down in the last couple of, I think it was 6 months after the blimp. So, and then they just decided to put him in a new cell instead of the cell that he was originally in. So yeah, I guess that's a theory as well. Maybe he did set blimp out, but then when he blimped back in, the cell wasn't there, and so he was free. So he tried to escape, and was put in a new cell. So yeah, comment down below if I missed any Easter eggs or references, and if you have any predictions for the upcoming episodes. See ya.